go to the number 2 prospect, who you have at number 4, actually, and that's Nolan Smith out of Georgia, who I have as my number 2 edge rusher. This guy to me is the best run stuffer in the class. A guy who very, obviously good for him. Weighed in at 238 as he was 235, which is very much small. This dude looks smaller on tape than he is, 6'2", 238. Obviously a senior. I mean, this guy is the best pure bendy edge rusher in the class. I think he has the most bend, the most finesse. This guy was fantastic on a Georgia front that for the past 2-3 years has, pumped out just, defensive monster after monster. I really like this guy. Ran a 4.39. That's ridiculous for an edge rusher, especially. It's not like he's a big dude. Obviously thinner than a Will Anderson and then like a Tyree Wilson. But this dude I think is fantastic. High motor. And you see, unlike a lot of the other edge rushers, this guy drops into coverage a lot. I was watching his tape against Missouri, like almost the beginning of that tape, half the snaps he was dropping into coverage. So you can kind of use him to fake him in as he's going to rush the passer and drop him inside to kind of fake out the quarterback and be using a lot of disguised zone coverages. So again, he offers a bunch of that. I think he is a little confined to what he'll play. I think this guy is ideally, an outside linebacker.
Yeah, a 3-4 outside linebacker.
3-4 outside linebacker.
Likely.
I think he would, struggle a little bit at that pure edge rusher where I think Will Anderson is much better at. But again, and another thing I loved about this guy is you look at all the write-ups and the draft profiles, like his teammates respected him so much. They saw this dude as a leader. They saw this dude as a role model. Obviously, he's a senior this year. And a lot of, they saw him as someone to look to in the locker room, which I love. That generally you can see translate into the NFL. But again, kind of like we'll talk about Will McDonald. Again, these are all edge rushers we'll get into. It's just when he tries to rip under an offensive lineman, if they can get that leverage, he's easily pushed down and knocked out of plays. So he doesn't have that beefiness that some of these other guys do. But I love Nolan Smith. I really, really like this guy. I think I have him valued at a top 20 pick. But for me, the ranking goes from I have Will Anderson at 94.5. I have Nolan Smith at an 89. So the drop off for me is not considerable, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, to highlight some of the points you bring up about Nolan Smith, this is a guy I have as my edge 4 position, and honestly I was expecting to have him a little higher. He's gotten a lot of hype recently. He ran extraordinarily well at the Combine. He performed like a true athlete at the Combine. But for me, his athleticism can only get him so far. He is the smallest edge rusher in this year's draft class. Of everyone, not just of these top 5. This is the smallest edge rusher in this year's draft class, standing at 6'2", 238, and he can't change the height. And the weight's going to be hard to change to keep the speed the same, and the speed is what sets him aside from everyone else. As you said, Keaton, he's an athletic freak. Okay, his bend when he gets around those offensive tackles is freakish. You don't see that from edge rushers, ever. I mean, this is like Hassan Reddick type.
Yeah, I
think that's the comparison for Nolan Smith. But I think, for me, this is not the prospect I love. He is super fast, but he's just too small. Offensive linemen get faster in the NFL. And Nolan Smith is able to do his thing at Georgia. He only came up with 3 sacks all season. This is a star-studded Georgia line. I know they split sacks. They split everything. But only 3 sacks for Georgia on a dominant defense, 7 tackles for loss, and I'm actually not as high on him in the run game as you are. For me, this is not the best run defender because he's too small to defend the run.
But
he is better utilized as a gap-plugging linebacker in the run game.
Which is why...
But they don't utilize him that way. And if he's going to play as a 3-4 outside linebacker, he's not going to be utilized to, plug the gaps. And I think that's where this is not going to be a 4-down player in the NFL. I think he's too small to be a 4-down player in the NFL. I don't think that they will use him except for 3rd-down pass rushes. At least in the first few seasons until he can work on that. He's too easily dominated in the run game. I think tackles stay the same size from college to the NFL, and they get faster and better. And for me, it's going to be, while it's not going to be as hard of a transition for Anderson and Wilson, it's going to be a harder transition for Smith being as small as he is. He's going to have a harder time getting around the edge, a harder time getting to quarterbacks, and a harder time bullying his way through D lines or through O lines at 6'2" to stop the run. For me, I do like this prospect. Don't get me wrong. I've got him graded at an 85.71, so almost an 86. This is a good player, and this is a first-round pick for me. But this is a back-end first-round pick because of the potential that is there. Right now, I don't think he translates to the NFL.
I disagree because if you look at the tape, Nolan Smith has been dominant in the run game.
Not always.
You look at what the profile for a good run defender is, either a huge defensive tackle or it's those freakish athletes who are, like Aaron Donald, fantastic run defender. Fletcher Cox, like looking at guys like that, obviously the big defensive tackles, but you need to have that fluidity in your game. Like you're not going to get that from Tyree Wilson. You're not going to get that from Will Anderson at that level that Nolan Smith gives you because he has that fluidity in his hips, obviously not as big. But I mean, you look at size, besides weight, him and Will Anderson are only an inch separated. And again, size is different, power is different. But I think the size for Nolan Smith, to me, is not as much of a question mark, especially if he's plugged in as a 3-4. This guy can rush the passer, and is, I think, going to be arguably drafted more for that run-stuffing game. I really like him. I think this dude is out-and-out the best run defender, and I think that where people take his size against him, this is what goes for him in the run game is the size because he has the fluidity I think a lot of these other edge rushers don't.
Just a small part I disagree. 6'2" does not concern me. Aaron Donald is 6'1", 6'2". Yeah. Aaron Donald is small in that sense. 238 pounds. It's just not big enough for me. In the run game in college, it might have worked, but he is. I'll give it to him. In the run game, he is a great tackler. He is not going to miss tackles, or not many. He didn't miss very many in college. I don't expect him to miss many in the NFL. But if you put him in a short down situation, say a 3rd and 2, and you line him up as an edge rusher, and he's not upright, he's not going to win. You've got 6'8", 350-pound tackles in the NFL who can't match his speed, but if this is just a halfback dive, just going straight up the middle, they're just going to push him.
But that's the thing.
He's not weak, and he's not.
I feel like you're looking at it wrong because that's true. But again, like I think I agree. I think what we're saying you can use as a pro and a con. Like obviously, yeah, that size will matter, but obviously it gives him that speed. And NFL, as much as obviously the NFL tackles are better, they're more fluid, they're faster. There are very few that are able to be at 6'8", 6'7", 300 plus pounds. To be as shifty and have the hips like it. Like, I mean, Penei Sewell's one of those guys, and he's not even 6'8".
But that's the difference you get in the NFL. I think there are just so many more tackles that you get.
He's more fluid, he's bendy, so he can use that speed. His get-off is fantastic to just warp around defender, warp around offensive linemen.
He can, there's no doubt, and that's why I have him there for the potential. But it's just the second a 6'6" plus, 320-pound plus offensive lineman gets a hand on him, the play's over.
But
if Nolan Smith can get not literally, but if Nolan Smith can get around the edge, yes, you're going to have a hard time keeping up with him. But if he is just slightly off the mark, or if an offensive lineman knows what's coming, because he is, and we haven't talked about this yet, a relatively one-dimensional pass rusher. A
lot of these guys are.
A lot of them are, but they have power. So they can use Will Anderson can use his straight arm, and he can put it into a counter move. He can put it into a speed rush. He can put it into a power rush, a bull rush, any kind of rush. Will Anderson, he's not he's not amazing at every single one, but he can use all of them. Nolan Smith can't just bull rush a 6'7" offensive lineman. His first, on almost every single pass rush, his first instinct is to run around the side. And if an O-lineman can see that coming, Nolan Smith has his spin move, which it's actually a really good spin. It's a fluid spin. And it's a second resort. He needs to incorporate more pass rush moves to really be involved in games. And I think a lot of the reason that we're seeing him mocked to a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, who have Hassan Reddick, is because he's not ready to start in the NFL. He's not.
I feel like
he needs to sit and he needs to learn behind someone similar to him, like Hassan Reddick, and I am 100% sure this guy can develop into a great NFL pass rusher. Not right now. He's not NFL ready for me.